So without further ado, Rob Badger and Nita Winter, thank you for presenting all of your amazing work tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me get us set up here. There we go.
Well, we want to thank all of you so very, very much for coming to our presentation this evening. It's a special treat to present to the San Diego chapter because we've spent so much time in the Anza Borrego Desert, and I've done projects for the Trust for Public Land down in the San Diego area, so I'm familiar with a lot of the area there.
So we're thrilled to be here tonight, and we'll tell you another connection with San Diego a little further on. And we just want to take you on our journey, 27 years of photographing wildflowers and how we ended up with Beauty and the Beast, California Wildflowers and Climate Change.
It all started in 1992 when I was at a film processing lab in San Francisco where we lived, and I was talking to a friend who's a nature photographer, and she said, you know, the Antelope Valley California Poppy Reserve is really having an amazing year this year after 6 years of not a very good bloom. She says, I'm sure you've photographed there before, but you know, this is something really special. I said, no, actually, I haven't photographed in that preserve. She said, really? You're a nature photographer and you've never photographed in the Poppy Reserve? It's one of the most famous places for flowers in the whole state. I said, no, I haven't. She said, well, we have to go. So she and another friend of ours and I went down to the Poppy Reserve, and the first couple days it was really windy, so we didn't get very many pictures, but we got to see what was there. That first evening I called back home to Nita and said, Nita, I've seen something that I've never seen before. I mean, we've seen California poppies, but nothing ever like this. And I described to her what it was to see these you know, the wind move across these poppies in waves off into the distance. And she said, well, come pick me up. I'm between jobs. We've got to see this because you know that if the temperature heats up and the drying winds increase, you'll see more of the poppies dying. So we got to do this now. So that's what I did. And that's what started this whole project, photographing wildflowers. It was one spot preserved in California.
And so it was, I was in San Francisco. I was a people photographer at the time, and I had assignments, and that's why I couldn't come down. And so Rob drove all the way back to San Francisco to pick me up. And we spent several days in the preserve and on the BLM land on the other side of the valley. And we were both blown away because we both grew up in the Northeast, and we don't have the desert or wildflower blooms anywhere near like this. And we were hooked. So in case you have to get off early and you want to be able to find the book or more information about us, you can go to wildflowerbooks.com. And Rob and I met 34 years ago in a photo lab. I was waiting for my prints, and this prince showed up. And we, as I said, I was a people photographer at the time, and Rob was doing nature photography, mostly nature photography, a little bit of environmental issue photography, but main focus was nature photography at the time. And 34 years later, we were still together, and both of us had started focusing more on wildflowers. So that became the focus of our work.
This is the oldest image that's in the book. It was taken in, I think it was 1984. At that time, I had been looking for some beautiful pictures of the the grasslands around Monterey, and I came across this amazing California buckeye tree with these, pretty purple flowers that I knew nothing about. And I thought, well, it's nice to have flowers in the photograph, so I'll include them. So, like I said, this is the oldest image in the book.
It was about 2 years before we met.
Yeah. And as Nita mentioned, when she met me, I had been photographing for quite a while. I'd been doing mainly nature and landscape photography. So after 25 years of doing that, I really wanted to do something more with my work than just try to get work in books or Sierra Club calendars or sell prints. So I was fortunate to be hired by the Trust for Public Land, and I photographed over 30 different land acquisition projects for them. This is one area that's in the Sierra foothills. This was privately owned ranch land that the for public land eventually conveyed into the public land system. It became part of Sequoia National Park.
So these are redbud and buckeye and oak trees.
I had also been doing a lot of environmental issue photography, such as mining on public land. And I just photographed so many negative scenes. I was just getting really, really burned out with seeing so much devastation happening on our public lands. So I wanted to do more with my photography than just photograph things that were happening that were bad. So I decided, well, doing flower photography, what can I do with that? We can attract people to the beauty of what's on our public land and hope to inspire them to save these wonderful places.
Because with both of our work, we found that when you photograph negative things in a beautiful way, an engaging way, then people actually stop and look rather than getting turned off. So we thought, well, we can also do that with beauty as well. So as I mentioned, I was a people photographer for probably the first 25 years of my career. And even before that, I was a firefighter with CAL FIRE, stationed up in Leggett. And I was the first female firefighter at that station back in 1976. And this was land moving tires, those huge tires that had caught fire. That's why the smoke was so black. And I would just keep a camera on my belt and was able to do some photography while I was working. And the image on the right is from the Children of the Tenderloin series, which launched my career focusing on children and families and creating healthy communities. I also did the Children's Defense Fund calendars and worked with a talented artist, Taya Schrack, to hand color my images for their calendars, and then got into a series called The Faces of a number of different communities. We would create 7-foot banners with portraits of communities celebrating diversity. So it was the Canal District in Marin County, Vallejo, Novato, and Marin City, where we lived, where there was a large African-American population. And I started having some health issues, so I pulled back on doing the people photography, and that actually allowed me to go out and spend more time with Rob in the field photographing wildflowers.
Someone was nice enough to take our picture when we were backpacking up at an area south of Lake Tahoe, Carson Pass, which our understanding is a convergence of a few ecoregions. There are plants that come up from the Great Basin Desert. There are plants in the Sierra Nevada. There are plants that come up from the foothills. So this was a place we were told that had an amazing diversity of native wildflowers. So I was carrying 85 pounds of gear. Nita was carrying 65 pounds of gear. All that, so much of that weight was camera equipment and lighting equipment that I carry. We do everything out in the field. All our photographs are made with natural light. with the plants safe and sound in the ground. We don't pick plants and then take pictures of them later. We spend an average of about 45 minutes photographing a plant. So being involved with one individual for that long creates quite an appreciation for an individual of the species.
So this is Lake Winnemucca in the background, as Rob said, in the Carson Pass area. And I was carrying 65 pounds of equipment, and I said I was never going to do that again. So often we will just go out for day trips because there's a lot to carry. And when Rob says lighting equipment, we'll show you some of that, but it's all done with natural light. It's not with strobes. So it's reflectors and diffusion discs and stakes and that type of thing. And so in order to be able to pay for the work we were doing, we would sell work to our consultants and architects to be used especially in healthcare facilities. And we had 34 images built into this medical center in Redwood City in the South Bay. And this is 8 feet tall by 20 foot wide. And we had 7 of these that all were color coordinated for the floor.
So whenever we could, we tried to get images of California's beautiful native wildflowers into hospital settings. These images are different from the strict type of botanical portraits that I usually do. They're part of a series called the Contact Series, where the flower petals are gently touching the front of a wide-angle lens, and I'll explain that later.
And when there aren't very many flowers around, we try to get out and photograph birds in the refuges. And these are also used in healthcare settings. These are Merced National Wildlife Refuge, Woodbridge near Sacramento.
So one of the most frequent questions we get asked is, what is your favorite wildflower to bloom? In all the 27 years you've been photographing, what most struck you? Well, in 2003, there was an amazing bloom above the town of Gorman, which is on Interstate 5. As you leave Los Angeles and you go north, before you drop down into the valley, you go through Tejon Pass, which is about 4,000 feet. Well, from the level of the freeway up to the top of the ridges was about 1,000 feet, and then about 1.5 miles wide. All this was covered with flowers. I had been driving that route since 1966. I'd never seen anything like this bloom. The hardest thing to do was to settle on a composition because everything was just so beautiful. So as what you're seeing in the foreground is public land. It's on Hungry Valley State Vehicular Recreation Area. Private land is across on the hillsides, and the freeway goes out of sight down below, going from right to left, going north. So that gives you some kind of orientation. This is in the Tehachapi Mountains.
And we're looking east right now.
And so this was at the tail end of a late spring storm in April. The clouds were slowly dissipating and the clouds were moving. So there were all these beautiful highlights of sunshine on these on this amazing collection of different colored flowers.
Really magical. And then our second favorite wildflower bloom was just a few years ago in 2017 in the Carrizo Plain National Monument. And this is in the Tembler Mountains as we're coming up and over the mountains from Bakersfield. And on the west side of the plains is Caliente Mountains. And somebody had told us, you got to go up this road to find the desert candles. And in 27 years, we had seen very few desert candles. And we came around the corner and our mouths just dropped open. There were tens of thousands of desert candles.
This was another area that was really challenging to focus on because everything, wherever we looked for about a quarter of a mile up and down the road was just covered with flowers.
And one of the things that's really fun about the desert candles is that the stems are hollow. So as you see on the left, the light will come through the stems. And as we're coming down off of the Caliente Mountains, you can see the Carrizo Plain and then the Tembler Mountains in the background.
So the flowers went beyond either side, either edge of the frame, but I wanted to put the road in there to give people a sense of the expanse of these flowers.
And to our right, which we couldn't see from this vantage point, were a lot of purple, the purple patches of Phacelia. And this is a detail of some of the flowers on the plain. And this image was taken, I took it with my iPhone. And Rob and I sat down one day and we said, how many different cameras did we use during this time? And including the iPhone, we figured out we had used 11 different cameras. We had started with film and eventually worked our way into digital cameras as they got better and better. And now we work with 36 and 42 megapixel cameras, right? Yeah. Sony cameras. Because of the work that we do with the hospitals, we need really large files.
So there are three different.
Well, wait, can I interrupt for a second?
I'm sorry.
We want to take you behind the scenes. And this is a 2-page spread that's in the book where we invite you to see behind the scenes as to what we do.
There are three types of floral portraits that we do. On the left-hand side of the page and the top, this is a strict botanical portrait where we put either a black or a white background behind the flower. And we do that to isolate the flower because often there's a distracting background, twigs, other plants, rocks, things like that. So the intent with these botanical style portraits is to show just the beauty of the plant. Often I've used different types of fabric in the background. And at one point I thought, well, gee, I'm using this fabric. Is there something I can do compositionally to add more of an artistic element to the botanical portrait? So the middle photograph, perhaps you can see that there are folds in the fabric that I've used to help complement the floral portrait. On the right-hand page in the middle, you can see that I've wrapped this alpine daisy that we photographed at 11,000 feet in the Sierra. I've wrapped this with a white fabric. So the challenge then was to get these beautiful artistic folds to look just right in the whole composition.
And if there's any breeze at all, the fabrics will move.
So on the left-hand side, the lowest picture is an example of the contact series that I talked about earlier. I found a way to gently get the petals of the blossoms to touch safely the front of the lens. And what happens, because the flower is touching the lens is blocking the light that's falling on the flower. So then the light source is coming from light reflected from behind the flower. So the light coming from that source is being transmitted through the flower petals, and it gives this really nice, soft, translucent effect to the floral portrait. And as far as I know, I'm the only one who's develop that technique. And I like doing that because it gets me off the tripod. It's a much more spontaneous process, and it's showing the flower in a way that generally hasn't been seen before.
And in the book, we take you behind the scenes, but in the talk, we actually get to show you a lot more examples of our setups.
So Nita had found this beautiful desert lily in the Anza Borrego Desert State Park later on in the evening, and it was too dark to just go and photograph to get the kind of light that we wanted. So we came back early the next morning. The light was coming from the east, low on the horizon, and we started photographing. Because the light was coming at such a low angle, one side of the plant was being illuminated, but the other side was in shade. So we had to bounce light into the part of the plant that was in the shade to balance the light so everything had a good exposure. And then we had to bounce light into the front of this beautiful lily to even off the exposure. Also, you can see piles of clothes on the left-hand side. That was to shade the sand beneath the plant's leaves because we didn't want these bright highlights there. Well, you can also see that I'm looking at a Polaroid. It took me 6 Polaroids and 2.5 hours to get the lighting right on this plant, but it was really, really worth it. If you are acquainted with a desert lily, you may be aware that often it's a tall plant, maybe 2.5 feet to 3 feet tall with not a whole lot of blossoms. This plant was a very, very short plant. As you can see, it's putting all its energy out into buds and into blossoms. This was in 1998 with a really high rainfall in an El Nino rain year.
And this was the first 100-year bloom we went to in 1998. In 2005, we returned to the desert for the second 100-year bloom. And now they don't call them 100-year blooms anymore because with climate change, they're happening more often because you have the swing of the droughts and the higher rainfall. And now they call them super blooms.
So this is another way of how we photograph. But again, everything is safe and sound in the ground.
And we live 5 miles north of the Golden Gate Bridge in Marin County, which has a huge biodiversity from the ocean to mountains. And so it's been a great place to photograph right in our own backyard. And there are quite a few images in the book from Marin County. This one isn't, but most of the pictures or many of the pictures are in the book. There's 190 images in the book.
So this is how we photograph. So often we'll photograph the plants with a black background and then with a white background, and then at home go and see which it is we like better.
And we always, we often end up near the road, and because we don't want to traipse on things and do any damage. Plus, as you're driving, I was called Eagle Eyes as a kid because I was really good at finding money on the beach. And I find that my eyesight picks out colors really easily. So I often will find the flowers, and then Rob is willing to suffer on his knees. And he's a Capricorn, so he'll spend more time with the composition, and then I'll look at it as well. So it becomes his, hers, and ours is how we describe the images in the book. And then often we'll find insects that we didn't notice were there, or we leave them there. And sometimes we have to deal with wind. And so we'll have to pull out a diffusion tent in order to control the wind. As I said, the work can be back breaking or neck breaking, real uncomfortable. But when you really want to get that image, I was fortunate Rob was willing to carry most of the equipment, and and suffer.
So this was a flower that Nita had found, again, late in the day. I came back the next day. I was able to find it, and it was one of the spring storms. I wasn't sure if it was going to rain or not, but I wanted to get this flower before all the blossoms had changed. I was fortunate to get the picture. I packed up, and 5 minutes later it started raining. But the beauty of photographing in the springtime when it's still raining is that there will be a lot of clouds. So the light is very soft, very diffuse, and it's a wonderful light source to photograph flowers under.
And we often try to find something different, some different way of showing an image. So this is Franciscan paintbrush, and Rob chose to just photograph the tips. Western Azalea. This is one of our favorite trails, is to go up to a place called the West Point Inn on Mount Tamalpais in Marin County. And the azaleas are one of our favorite flowers because they're not only beautiful, but they smell so good. We drove all the way up to Quincy in Northern California to catch to photograph the mountain lady slipper, which we'll show you a little later, and found the Shasta Iris.
So this is some of the lighting equipment we were talking about. We use a big diffusion disc when we don't want the sun falling directly on the plant. Again, like Nita said, we photograph as close to a trail or as close to the road as we possibly can. So we're not going into the environment and walking on plants and just disturbing the soil.
And if you work with diffusion discs, you can also play with which angle, how close you have it to the plant. We encourage you to move it around, to move it closer, further away, which is fun, that you don't always get that with the strobe, which often comes from the camera angle.
So this is another example, I hope you can see on your screen, of the wrap series, where I've taken the fabric and wrapped it around the plant to add and other artistic elements, so I don't have just a plain stark white or a stark black background.
And having the diffusion disc in the back allows the center of the flower to just glow and be lit from behind. We mentioned before the wrap series up at 11,000 feet, because the rocks were just too distracting. Another example of setup of wrap series for the Alpine Columbine.
So all these images are in the book.
And one of our favorite places to go near us is called Ring Mountain. And it was preserved because of the Mariposa, the Tiburon Mariposa lily, which only grows on Ring Mountain, nowhere else in the world. And that's Mount Tamalpais in the background.
So this is another example of the contact series. This was a phlox we found out in Point Reyes National Seashore. And this is a giant red paintbrush we found in the Sierra. So playing with this type of technique yields a lot of bad results because I'm not on a tripod, and the slightest movement touching the flower can change the whole composition. So I'm lucky if I get a good photograph out of 20 photographs.
And so
but when we do get them, Sometimes they're just really, really beautiful, and they're like nothing else we've seen as far as floral portraits go.
And this is 12 feet tall in a hospital right now. So it's really, really fun to see how they can get built into the architecture. And as Rob said, he's working without a tripod. He was looking for some way to become more spontaneous. As a people photographer, I was used to working without a tripod. As a nature photographer, Rob was very much tripod oriented. And so this was something very new and different for him.
So as we mentioned before, sometimes we'll photograph a plant in direct sunlight and then try the same, virtually the same composition with a diffusion disc to soften the light.
So this is with a diffusion disc. This is direct sun.
So you can see by what we're explaining that, you know, why it can take so much time, why it can take an average of 45 minutes just with one darn plant.
And up to 2.5 hours.
The other most frequent question we get asked is, well, how much Photoshop do you do on your images? Well, the answer is, it depends. In this particular instance, we were photographing in the Columbia River Gorge, and we got to this place where there are these beautiful flowers. I forget what they are, but the light that was falling on the scene was blue skylight. So the camera sensor picked up the actual color falling on the scene, and that's why this is such a cool looking composition. Well, what we saw was more like this. I mean, that was what our eyes saw.
Because our brain corrects for that blue light.
So the only source of sunlight was, the only area that was sunlit was up in the upper middle part of the frame. That's why that's so yellow. And also the camera sensor records the scene in a very, very low color saturation and a very, very low contrast. So then it's up in post-processing to bring the scene back to what we experienced when we were there. So that is the answer to how much Photoshop you do. Because we're doing plants, we want them to be as accurate as possible with what it was we saw and what the average person would see when they went out there. So we're very careful not to exaggerate the colors.
And sometimes we have to clean up the background a bit. This was a big sheet. It had some wrinkles in it. And so we go and we clean up the background. And this is what it looks like in the spread in the book. Here's another situation where we have a seam because this plant was so close to the ground. We had to use 2 pieces of background, and it was very windy, so there was a lot of sand. And again, it was low contrast, low saturation, bring it into Photoshop, and we bring it back to what our recollection of the experience was.
The very tips of all these fine branches have these really, really intense red little blossoms.
The little pink ones.
On them.
And again, the spread in the book.
We probably could go.
No, we're fine.
So someone was mentioning,
Wait a minute. Yeah.
Oh,
Justin was talking.
yeah,
about
Justin, you were talking about mosquitoes
or bugs anyway.
Or bugs or something. Well, go ahead. You can tell the story.
We were, not only do we have to deal with the rain at times and the wind, but we also sometimes have to battle with the bugs. And in Utah, we were at Capitol Reef in Utah. We had a particularly bad experience with the bugs. On our way to New Mexico from there, we stopped in the middle of nowhere and to photograph these flowers. Within 3 minutes, the no-see-ums had found us. And if you don't know what a no-see-um is, it is a tiny bug that will go through screening, that will go in your ears, up your nose, into your clothes. So I was finally pulled out a clean pair of underwear to put over my head to keep them out of my ears, and put on
Nita
the
gave me
bandana.
one too.
And this is what happened to poor Rob after several days at Capitol Reef. And they itched worse than mosquitoes, and he had over 200 bites on his arms and body.
Oh, Justin was asking about fire ants.
Fire ants,
Yeah,
right.
no, we've never encountered those, luckily, but and I never want to. But I mean, we go through all these things because the plants are so beautiful, and we wanted to show them in the best light possible. And so it's really worth everything to be out there where these plants live, to see everything around them in the plant's environment, the birds, the insects, everything. It's, you do what you can to experience the beauty of California's native plants.
And we also often would get back to the car in the dark and would not cook. We never brought stoves with us because we just never had time. So it was always cold food. And so we had, Rob was invited to present a project to Blue Earth Alliance, who became our fiscal agent for the project, and developed Beauty and the Beast, Wildflowers and Climate Change. And we were invited by the San Francisco Public Library to do an exhibit that focused on California. And that's how we ended up with Beauty and the Beast, California Wildflowers and Climate Change. And the image on the left under the words Western California, if you can see them, that's the Tiburon Mariposa Lily. And we had 100 images in this exhibit, including a ecological regions map that's in the back, created by CNPS state office.
So you can imagine, after 20 years of photography in so many different places, not only in California, but throughout the West, was really difficult. It was really difficult to hold the image, hold the exhibit down just to 100 images, but we were able to do it.
And in the case in the foreground, there are some knee pads. If you ever are looking for really comfortable knee pads, these were donated by a company called Ergodyne. I'll put it in the chat. ERDYNE, Ergodyne, and they're like kneeling in thick jello. They just made all this work possible.
I've literally spent hundreds of hours kneeling in these knee pads.
And then also Think Tank was really helpful in giving us equipment where Rob could keep the cameras around his waist and then use the pack to carry everything else. And we're really excited that that exhibit, or half of that exhibit, became a traveling exhibit. That exhibit Envoy has been traveling around the state, and it has been seen by 45,000 people. And the San Diego Natural History Museum just this week is hanging a large print version of the exhibit. And this is a mock-up of one of the walls. And their plan is to open the museum on January 15th and have this exhibit there. So we invite you to go see the exhibit when it opens, and we'll be doing a different type of talk for the museum, probably sometime in January. And unfortunately, we won't have an opening, but we hope to be there for the closing. It'll be up for at least a year and possibly 2 years. So we wanted to take the photos. We had so many photos. Okay, the whole purpose of it was to educate and inspire action of the exhibit. So we went, okay, how do we expand on that and create a companion coffee table book? And Rob came up with the idea of doing short stories, personalized nonfiction stories by a variety of authors. So I started doing research and finding different people and getting numerous voices for the wildflowers. So we have Peter Raven, upper left, who's a renowned botanist, world-renowned botanist, who wrote the foreword and the first story, The Origin of California's Wonderful Plants. To his right is Jose Gonzalez, who is the co-founder of Latino Outdoors. Next to him is Wendy Takuda, who was a TV anchor, and when she retired, she got involved in restoration work and pulling broom, and she wrote a wonderful, very funny story about Zen and the art of broom pulling. To her right is Kenna, who's our youngest author. We wanted diversity, not only ethnic diversity, but we also wanted age diversity. She was 20 at the time, and Peter was 82. We have a number of different artists. In the center there is Robin Wall Kimmerer, an indigenous botanist and professor, and she wrote a wonderful story called What's in a Name. Did I say something wrong?
No, it's all right.
Okay, thank you. And then also from San Diego area on your left is Dr. Margaret Leinen, who's the director of the of the Scripps Oceanographic Institute. And she wrote a story on the science of climate change. And in the bottom center is Amber Paris, who some of you may know, who is the founder of Climate Kids and the Alliance for Climate Science.
And she was instrumental in getting our exhibit into the San Diego Museum of Natural History.
And she wrote the story on how to talk to children about climate change without scaring them.
So we have 16 different authors that did 18 different short stories. They're very, very quick reads. The way we designed the book was to pace a collection of flowers and then have a short story and then have more flowers. The purpose is to get people to go through the whole book to not only see California's beautiful diversity, but also to read the wildflower story and to read the climate change story and to read the conservation story.
In order to inspire hope and action. And it was a very collaborative project. We were really proud of what we were able to pull together.
So the book is divided into 3 sections, and the short stories are loosely connected to the title of each section. The first is The Gift of Beauty, the next is The Human Connection, and the third is Ensuring the Future. Again, we've spent a lot of time out in the deserts, the Southern California deserts. It's our favorite place to photograph.
So we have Gordon Leppick, who's a scientist with California Department of Fish and Wildlife. He wrote the story on wildflowers and climate change.
And then we had Ryan Burnett, who's with Point Blue Conservation in Marin County, and his essay was Chasing Spring, Timing is Everything. He talks about phenology, which is the timing of natural events and when they occur. And he focuses on the rufous hummingbird that has an annual migration from Mexico to the Pacific Northwest. This bird depends on wildflower meadows to be blooming at certain times during its migration. If the flowers aren't there because climate change has created the new climate where the flowers are blooming earlier before the bird gets there, because the snow is melting sooner, or because there's less snow because of drought. So he talks about this bird's plight. Now, this image was the luckiest photograph that I've made in the whole 20 years of photographing floral portraits. I was photographing this beautiful Scarlet Fritillary in Oregon, which this same plant is found in California, so I felt it was okay to show in the book. I was photographing just this tall plant. I had the right shutter speed, a fast shutter speed to stop the movement of the plant in the breeze. I had my finger on on the remote release, I was looking through the viewfinder, I see this bird come in there, I get 2 frames and it's gone. We waited 25 to 30 minutes more for a bird to come back, and it never happened, but I'm so fortunate to have this bird in the frame because we don't do a lot of hummingbird photography.
But we do try to capture insects and other pollinators when we can. We've also included information about pollinators. This is something from the National Wildlife Federation. Susan Twite wrote an essay on called Sudden Abundance about the 5 deserts of California. As we say, one of our favorite places. This was Anza Borrego during the second 100-year bloom in 2005. And we had rain 9 out of the 12 days we were there.
And if any of you are really well acquainted with the Anza Borrego, you're probably not seeing a whole lot of fog there. We were really, really fortunate to get this. There was so much rain, the ground was so saturated that there was a lot of water vapor in the air, and in the early mornings, this water vapor would condense, and you'd see this beautiful fog in a place that rarely gets fog where it's cold.
So again, as I mentioned, Robin Wall Kimmerer, who's the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, and her story about what's in a name, Zen and the Art of Pulling Broom. These are really fun stories, and we're getting wonderful feedback from people. Amber's on talking to children about climate change without scaring them. And one of Rob's favorite photographs, which is the candy flower that he photographed in Point Reyes National Seashore. Genevieve Arnold from the Theodore Payne Foundation. She's the seed bank manager, and she wrote about seed banking.
And we have a section in the book devoted to fire ecology, what comes back after fires have gone through. This was a fire poppy we photographed in the Santa Ana Mountains, Cleveland National Forest.
We also had a lot of fires a number of years ago in the Lake County area. And so we went up there to photograph.
This is that area in the Santa Ana Mountains up above Lake Elsinore that had burned the previous year.
And again, we had fog, which was really interesting. Lake County, once the trees and shrubs are burned away, the plants, the flowers are fertilized by the ash and also are exposed to a lot more sunlight. So the wildflower blooms can be just amazing. And even just 6 months after a fire, there's some good rains. The recovery is just amazing.
So we're told that a lot of lilies come back, a lot of geophytes come back after the burns. This area was just scorched, and this is what recovered 6 months later. Same here, this is an area just a short distance away from the previous image. This, if you look at the soil was all charred. We were photographing in Pepperwood Preserve in Sonoma County, north of the Bay Area. I carefully picked my way. I walked only on the invasive non-native grasses to get to this site. And if you look down at the soil, it was all charred. You can see that the trees in the upper left had been burned. So it's just amazing what comes back.
And this was from the Tubbs fire. You may have heard about it. It's the one that came through Santa Rosa and killed over 80 people. And so the fires can be really devastating. And on the other hand, it's amazing what'll come back afterwards. And I think Pepperwood has actually had 3 fires in the last 8 years go through their property.
So all these fire images are images that are in the book. Nita Nita found these two flowers next to each other. We didn't move them to create a composition. So these again were in the burn area. Our favorite places to photograph, one, because there's so much diversity, and two, because we have these amazing super blooms are California's desert. So we'll show you.
We're first going to show you Death Valley.
Yeah, this is Death Valley. This was intriguing for me to see these beautiful desert sunflowers in this absolutely stark rocky environment.
And this is the same time as the previous one, or the two before, where the meadows, the valley is full of desert sunflowers. But when you come higher up in this area, there was almost nothing growing. But if you look carefully, you can often find something. And this was nearby where I was photographing. Rob found this desert broom rape mixed in with all the gravel. And so we separated it out with the fabric, or isolated it, I should say. Again, Death Valley during the first 100-year bloom in 1998. And we would go out for 3 weeks to a month at a time when there would be blooms like this.
This was in Death Valley. And often you'll see the insects associated with the plants. This was a crab spider that was waiting to ambush insects coming in to pollinate the plant. This is the next series is in Joshua Tree. I just wish we had time to show all the beautiful images we had there. Uh-oh.
This is taking off on its own.
So
wait a minute, hold on. I gotta get back to where we're supposed to be.
Okay, sorry about that.
So Joshua Tree also that same year.
This is in the lower part of Joshua Tree, which is the Sonoran Desert. And often in these desert washes, you'll see canterbury bells here, canterbury bells there. Not a whole lot of plants. This was an average year. In 1998, again, the El Nino year, where there was an abundance of rain, Desert Wash was just literally bursting with desert canterbury bells and with Bigelow's monkey flower. There was an abundance of rain, and it happened over a longer period of time. So there were not only more plants, but the plants grew taller. So there were many, many more blossoms on many, many more plants.
A chicory. Smooth desert dandelion. I never thought of dandelion as being a wildflower, but they're really beautiful. And the Desert 5 spot, you have to be careful if you want to photograph them, because they start closing up around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which we found out the hard way.
And then next is the Anza Borrego.
This is the southern end of the park. You get away from the crowds. And this is the 2-page spread, which has the desert lily on the right that we showed you, and the desert chicory. And again, always looking for a different angle, a different approach to try to create fine art out of flowers.
So often I'll look beneath the blossom and try to get the sunlight being transmitted through these beautiful petals. And finally, the Antelope Valley, California Poppy Reserve, where this all started.
The San Gabriel Mountains in the background. And this was the same trip where we did Gorman and had those dark clouds. We came around to Antelope Valley and the storm clouds were still there.
But no rain.
We had a few snowflakes.
So there are a few images in the book that we photograph out of state, but some flowers we photograph out of state, but because we know these species do exist in the state, we
Gave ourselves permission.
We gave ourselves, thank you. We gave ourselves permission to include them because we wanted to represent these species in the book. So this is one of them, was prickly poppy photographed in the Great Basin Desert in Nevada. We're also looking for interesting backgrounds, natural backgrounds that aren't distracting, that add to the overall composition and an artistic feeling of a floral portrait. So we were lucky to find this beautiful serpentine behind this blue dix in the Sierra foothills.
One of our favorite places to go in Northern California is Table Mountain. And that has a lot of volcanic landscapes and really beautiful and varied wildflower blooms. The Mountain Lady Slipper on the left was the one I mentioned that we drove all the way up to Quincy to photograph. We both grew up on the East Coast where there were lady slippers, and when we heard that this one was there, we just had to go find it.
So the pasque flower on the right, we photographed in Mount Rainier National Park, but it does grow here.
So we're just taking you through, the last few slides is some of the 2-page spreads found in the book.
This again was on Mount Rainier, but the plant lives here. So the Tiburon Mariposa lily, you can see there are 2 blossoms associated with a wavy leaf soap plant on the image on the left. And these were found on Ring Mountain in Marin.
So we really want to thank a lot of CNPS members around the state who really helped us not only find flowers, but also helped identify flowers. And Bruce Baldwin was, and Christine Jacobs were people who really helped us go through the flowers, the book at the end before we published it to make sure we had the right identifications.
So the book has a glossary because there are 18 different essays with some may have scientific terms. So we wanted to make sure we had a glossary so people would know what the authors were talking about. And then the book also has 2 indices, a plant name index and a location index. So if people wanted to know, well, you know, where are there images of Death Valley? Where are there images of Anza Borrego? People could find that in the location index.
And then people ask us how we identify images. Often we rely on other people. We use guidebooks, but there are some really good online resources now for identifying plants. You have plantid.net.
And we use CalFlora a lot. There are so many wonderful photographs contributed by so many great photographers and amateur and professional botanists and just plant lovers. So often most of our identification would come from CalFlora, and then we'd get it verified. If we weren't certain, we'd get it verified by a CNPS person or a professional botanist. And then there's always CalScape,
which is really helpful if you want to find which plants to plant in your own home native garden.
And so we realize we're talking to CNPS members, so we know what we've been recently telling you. You're probably well aware of.
And also, I want to mention that in the book is a short story called You the Change Maker, and it includes 25 different things you can do to make a difference around climate change, land conservation, reducing waste, that type of thing. So in the book, there's some wonderful ideas on what you can do, and you can pick what you want to do and maybe over time grow and do more and more of them and
Right.
incorporate them into your life.
But again, these are CNPS people, so they're
Not necessarily.
well,
It's promoted by CNPS.
okay. You win.
I win. So one of the quotes that we put in the book that we really love and felt really talked about what we were doing was, truth and beauty can still win battles. We need more art, more passion, more wit in defense of the earth. And this was a quote from David Brower, who was the first president of the Sierra Club. And we love the idea of using art to inspire action. And so we offer two versions of the book. One is the regular edition book, and the other is a limited edition book that's signed and numbered, and it comes with a special cloth cover, a tip-in page, and a clamshell box to put it in. And if you get the regular edition book and you pull back the dust cover, there's a special cover underneath. And our designer, Laura Lovett, who is a board member of the Marin chapter of CNPS, was a book designer was the director of book design for Chronicle Books for many years. So we were really fortunate to have her to work with. And she came up with this idea for the sub cover.
So thank you. Thank you for spending so much time with us. I hope we haven't gone too far over. We really look forward to answering any of your questions. We'll spend as much time as you'd like to make sure everyone gets their questions answered. So thank you again for having us.
And you can find the book at Wildflower Book, or even better, Wildflower Books, plural.com. So thank you for joining us. And if I can, there we go.
Well, thank you, Rob and Nita. That was an amazing presentation, and you guys have done an extraordinary work. This would be the time that the next 2 minutes we'd all stand and clap. And the photographs are absolutely stunning. The chat has been going on that you put into it. So I'd like to move into the Q&A section. There's a couple questions that anybody, it's not too late, type in questions here and we'll get to them. And also, Rob and Nita, check the chat. Many thank yous are coming your way.
We can see that.
Oh, we're
Thank
grateful.
you.
Oh,
Thank you everyone for joining us.
you know, that's one thing
Okay,
that's so nice about doing
there
these
we go.
virtual presentations is we get to see the comments by so many people, and it really means a lot to us. Thank you.
And one question that we didn't
So
answer
there was a few
that often comes up, if I could just jump in, is are our pictures showing climate change, are documenting climate change? With wildflowers, they change with the weather, and the weather changes every year, but the climate changes over time. And in order to document the changes, it would take even longer than what we've done to actually show the changes in wildflowers. But we find the scientists are doing the research and documenting the changes, such as with the rufous hummingbird, and the fact that alpine flowers, as it's getting warmer and warmer, they don't have a place to move north or to move up into the mountains. They're running out of places that are cooler. So we are using the flowers to attract attention in order to be able to educate people and inspire them to take action.
So the first questions are about your equipment And there is a question about your backpack, and I think that picture was, as you described it, from the late 80s or 90s, but they asked if it was a low alpine backpack, and do you still use the same backpack?
Well, it was a backpack we found at REI on sale. And do you remember which the backpack is? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. When we were in the mountains, I don't know. We haven't used it for a while.
I don't know.
Rob, after carrying 65 pounds for so many years, now has back problems. So he doesn't carry that.
And that's without backpacking.
Yeah. So he doesn't carry that kind of weight anymore. Were they low packs? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
We got them probably 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So sorry, I don't remember, but the main thing is to get one that fits and is comfortable.
And there was a specific question about shooting film with the Hasselblad. Is there any specific reason for that? Shooting film with a Hasselblad.
That was before digital photography. I started using a Hasselblad medium format film camera in 1966. And I stopped using that camera in 2006 when Canon came out with a decent digital camera that had some good enough resolution to it that I could sort of replace a medium format film camera. And with using that first digital camera allowed me to see the results I was getting as far as exposure goes, which made it so much easier than taking a Polaroid when I was doing close-ups. And also with a Canon digital camera, it was a lot lighter. I could put a really nice macro lens on there. It was just so much easier to do the floral portraits. And so I dropped the film camera as quick as I could. I dropped a lot of weight, and it was just so much easier with digital photography to see what I was getting.
And you didn't have to worry about keeping film cold either.
Yeah.
And back then, a 12 megapixel camera, which is about like an iPhone now, was $8,000. And
17.
So it was 17,
Yeah.
17 megapixels was $8,000 back in 2007. So the price of good large sensor cameras is gone down significantly over the years.
I hope that answers the question.
And some people might not have heard the knee pads that you had recommended.
Oh, let me put that in here. Ergodyne.
There was a question about the knee pads since you recommended them so highly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm putting it in the chat right now. Ergodyne, ERGODYNE,
Yeah.
Ergodyne knee pads.
No, I don't. They have a variety now that I'm not aware of, but at least that'll get you to the company where you can see.
Rob uses larger ones than I do. And we found we could actually hike with them. We discovered them on Mount Rainier when somebody went hiking by us with them, and we went, "Hey,
what are those?" I mean, because I've been using these things that are these different variations of gardening knee pads, which just didn't hold up.
Is the equipment that you use, do you have like a list of it, the cameras and the macro lenses, or is that in the book?
No. If someone wants to send us an email, I'll be happy to tell them what it is we use, but I can tell you right now, we started with Canon equipment digitally. I've been using not only a medium format camera, but also a Canon 35 millimeter film camera. So we already had a lot of Canon lenses. I've had 3 different versions of Sony mirrorless cameras. The most recent one is the Sony A7R3. So it's a Sony camera. I have a Canon, I have an adapter on it that lets me use my Canon lenses. The macro lens I'm using is an old Canon 50mm macro lens, which is really, really sharp. And I like that 50mm. I've just been using that for years, and occasionally I'll put an extension tube between the lens and the camera, which allows me to focus even closer than the macro lens would ordinarily let me focus.
So the next question is an anonymous person asks if you've been photographing in Baja, California.
Oh, and
We wish. We just haven't gotten
wish.
there.
No, no.
We have friends who have, and it just looks like a wonderful place to go.
Yeah, we love the desert so much. That's the next desert to really visit. Another place we haven't photographed is the Channel Islands. And we really wanted to get that in the book because it's such a unique place for plants, but we just never had the time to get there before we got the book out.
There was a question about
and perhaps even further afield from you guys. They were asking, they suspect, let's see if I can open this up. Suspect some species have been more common. There will become more viable further north. And I might be able to add on to that question or answer as well, but there has been a number of species that are restricted to book by Sullivan-Vanderplank, and I hate to plug anything else, but there is a number of species that just pop over the border here. Now, as far as getting them further north, that is an open question for sure. And definitely there's restrictions in terms of physical borders as well across the border to the north. So there is a hard line there.
Justin,
the next question
Justin,
that's been coming up is there.
Excuse me, Justin, you're breaking up a bit, so maybe I can go through some of these questions.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Someone is asking, are the captions next to the photographs you're showing
That sounds fine.
included in the book?
Yeah.
And yes, there's a caption for every image in the book with both the common name and the Latin name.
So the caption includes the common name, the Latin name, the county it was photographed in, and the month that it was photographed
And the park, because almost all of our work is done on public land.
Yeah. So either it would be a national park, national seashore, national forest, national monument, almost everything was done on public land. So we like to make sure that people know where the image was actually taken.
And then Ada asks, can you discuss the difference between the 100-year bloom versus the super bloom again? Well, in 1998, there was a 100-year bloom. In other words, the conditions came together where
On average,
you would get that, let me start over again, excuse me.
okay.
A 100-year bloom is when you get the conditions that all come together, where you get these amazing wildflower blooms. And generally, those blooms are only seen once every 100 years. When we saw that 7 years later, they called it a 100-year bloom again. And then it was happening repeatedly. They changed it to super blooms because they were no longer happening every 100 years. They were happening more often.
And it's believed that because of climate change, and we've had these cycles of drought and more frequent deluge, that now these are no longer things that would occur on average every 100 years. Now they're occurring more frequently, again because of climate change, and so now they're just being called super blooms. That's our understanding. For example, that area that we showed above the town of Gorman in the Tehachapis, that was called a 50-year bloom. And I had been driving, like I said, up and down that area since 1966. I photographed that in 2003, and I had never seen that like that. But who knows if that's going to happen again in the next 10 or 20 years with all these variations in the climate. So I hope that answers the question.
And your favorite location in Anza, Borrego? I mean, one of our favorite is the southern end because it's quiet. There aren't a lot of people, and there's you have easy access. There used to be a really good cafe at the very end of the park that had great pie. Last time we were there, it wasn't as good, but can you think of other areas?
Yeah, a lot of people's favorite locations. If you ask any nature photographer out there, they'll probably tell you Henderson Canyon, where you see a lot of the evening primrose. And there's another pink flower, I forget the name of there.
Verbena.
Oh, and the beautiful verbena. So that's a wonderful place to photograph. Where else? Where did we get the Ocotillo? That was on the way out in the south end of the park. Yeah.
And then as far as Anza Borrego, what other impacts of climate change might be happening? And one of the things that we've really noticed that's somewhat related to climate change is the invasive species are taking hold, like the Asian mustard, because if you have wetter years, they can get a little more established than they might otherwise. Or for example, what happened with the Joshua trees this year, because of climate change and the introduction to of invasive grasses, the desert burned much hotter than it normally would and has killed a lot of Joshua trees.
But that was in Joshua Tree National Park. Yeah, also with the native grasses invading more in the Anza Borrego, we've been told that they're more fire prone. And so you get more of the fires that can also affect the native species.
Plant that we are still looking for after all these years.
Yeah.
More Mariposa lilies.
Yeah, we have very, very few of these beautiful, outrageous Mariposa lilies.
How much post-production work do you do to edit these images? Quite a bit. In most cases, quite a bit, but it's in order to get the image back to what we saw, what we felt. As Rob pointed out, you have to add saturation, you have to add contrast. So there's a fair amount of work that's done on them. And it also depends on how big it's going. If it's going 12 feet in an exhibit, it'll take several days of working on an image.
Also, the original capture may not show a lot of shadow detail that's important, so we can bring up the shadow detail by lightening the shadows. If the highlights are a little bit overexposed, we can, in Photoshop, we can darken the highlights. So again, the whole intent is to show someone what we saw, what we felt, and what the average person would see if they saw that scene or they saw that flower.
And another technical question, what is the first editing tools that you use on a new photo? And that's Photo Mechanic we use for managing images.
Well, it's not an editing tool. We use Photo Mechanic. We don't use a lot of Lightroom, and I know that's really, really popular. I've been using Photoshop for years. Most of my work, first of all, we capture in the raw format. And so the raw file has to be processed in raw processing software like Lightroom or like Photoshop's Camera Raw. So I use a lot of Photoshop's Camera Raw, which is the same processing engine, the same processing software that Lightroom is. You have the same controls. I use Camera Raw for as much as I can do there, and then if I need more specific things that I can't do in Camera Raw, I import that image into Photoshop, where I have much more control with really specific colors, with adjusting and selecting certain areas for highlights, saturation, contrast, things like that. So it's a two-step process. First, the raw image gets processed in Photoshop Adobe Camera Raw, and then if needed, I take it into Photoshop to do more.
And then Jermaine was asking questions about fabrics, and you feel free to go to our website and send us an email too, or give us a phone call and we'll talk to you. For the wrapped series, we generally like to use chiffon because it handles the curves very well. You have to experiment. We can't tell you really the best fabrics. We went to Joann's Fabrics and experimented, because some fabrics everything sticks to, and some fabrics repel the seeds and the sand and that type of thing. So you'll probably just have to experiment.
Oh yeah. One more thing. What we do in image processing, like Nita said, and like we showed in one of the images with that eriogonum in the desert, that finely veined eriogonum, often there's just a lot of dust or fine twigs or something on the fabric. We have to go into Photoshop and clone out those imperfections on the fabric to get a really nice clean background. So that can be really, really time consuming.
And then recommend for beginners, I want to see the flowers in person and learn more about them. Well, CNPS is always a great place to learn. There's also each chapter, if there's a chapter near you, if you're not in the San Diego area, there should be a chapter in the area. In your area, there's CNPS's Facebook, where a lot of people will post a flower and ask somebody, can you help me identify it? So that's always a good place. And then you've got Theodore Payne Foundation up north near LA. They put out wildflower reports on what's happening, desertusa.com for wildflower reports. But I would always start with CNPS as a great resource, because people who love flowers love sharing about them as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And before everybody logs off really quick, I wanted to point out that much of your photography's been in Flora edition. Hopefully my internet connection can remain stable. Have you been able to post your photographs in the Fremontia as well?
Oh, that's great to remind us. We have a book review by Matt Ritter in the next issue of Fremontia. So that's about to come out. And then there's an article from last December, I think, Flora issue back in December. There's an article about the book. And then we've had some of our actually trees in the fall color issue as well. So our images do show up in Flora and Fremontia.
Our book wouldn't have been what it is without California Native Plant Society,
which is our co-publisher, as a matter of fact. And has anyone kicked you while you were taking pictures? No, but we've had to deal with dogs that are just curious, but we're on the ground and they want to come over and check it out. And you know they're going to trample the flowers. So we've had
That's a good question. I love it.
People give us a hard time when we chase the dogs off, and they say that they're there more often than we are. So how dare us?
So I wanted to
We
remind
photographed
everyone that
wildflowers in Torrey Pines. No, we haven't photographed wildflowers in Torrey Pines.
We
That's
haven't,
another place.
we haven't been there while the wildflowers were blooming.
It's a huge state and there's a lot of places we haven't been, and it's really frustrating.
So we want to thank all the people who stayed on during all the questions. Feel free to reach out to us if you like. Our information's on the website, wildflowerbooks.com. And you can also see more of our other work at winterbadger.com. We lucked out with great last names. Winterbadger.com is another website where you can see more of our work, such as the environmental work, more birds, more people, my people photography. So we love this tonight.
And I'd like to point out that the San Diego Natural History Museum, if you'll be in the area next January, January 15th is hopefully the opening of your exhibition with your work. And all of these links and links to amazing other things can be found at calscape.org, CNPS-SD.org, CNPS.org, of course. And CalFlora. There's a lot of resources out there, including access to people online mostly, but also in the field. Hopefully, give us a wave while you're on the trail from 6 feet, 20 feet away. I also wanted to point out that tomorrow on our seed website, where we sell seeds, we are doing a very short fall only special for acorns that are local to the San Diego County area. Joseph's just put in the link right there in the chat, so please follow that. There's also some Brodea that has become available from Telos. That's mostly northern species. We hope some of our compadres from the north will pick those up, and if you're curious about how they'll grow down here, they'll be on available for a limited time until they basically sell out. So again, I'd like to thank everybody for showing up and giving us time tonight, and especially Rob Badger and Nita Winter. Thank you.
Oh,
thank you guys. Amazing work.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And I also put on the chat our phone number and Rob's. Oops, I spelled his email wrong. It's Rob Badger with an R at the end. And if you live in the Bay Area and you want to get signed books or personalized books, you can pick them up from us. We're in Southern Marin. You can buy them on the website and just put in for pickup, and we can arrange that as well. So they make wonderful gifts. We're getting amazing response from people who have been gifted the books. So if you're looking for something for the holidays, and it also allows people to bring nature inside during these crazy times, and it's great for reducing stress.
And I want to thank David Swanson, who said, I'll be ordering your book for a certain someone for Christmas, as well as a copy for myself. So I hope I'm not giving away anything. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We love you all.